This is the story of Kris Moose, written and narrated by Mary Beth McGee. Once upon a time, a moose named Kris lived up north in Alaska. He was a handsome moose with a lovely white coat and dark eyes. He wore a red and white striped scarf like a candy cane wrapped around his neck. His antlers were big and broad. Kris loved the north. He loved to see the beautiful northern lights. He loved to play in the piles of snow. He loved the smell of the evergreen trees on the mountains. He loved the people who lived around him. Most of all, Kris loved living near the North Pole and Santa Claus. The people loved Kris, too. They brought him treats to eat, like bunches of hay and bowls of grain. Sometimes someone would give him an apple. He liked apples very much. Children patted him on the nose and hugged his legs to let him know how they loved him. They would brush him to keep his coat soft and smooth. Kris was a very happy moose. But one day, he heard something that made him feel sad. He heard the children talking about Santa's reindeer and how the reindeer pulled Santa's sleigh around the world so that he could deliver gifts at Christmas. Kris decided he had to be a reindeer on Santa's team. He ran all over the countryside looking for someone who could tell him how to get on Santa's team. No luck. No one knew how a moose could become a reindeer. No one knew how Kris could join the team. Poor Kris. He was very sad. "Wyatt, how can I join Santa's reindeer team if I can't find him? What should I do?" Kris asked his best friend Wyatt. "I always write a letter to Santa about what I want," answered Wyatt. "Maybe you could write a letter." "But I can't write," said Kris, as a big tear ran down his face. "I'll never get to be on Santa's reindeer team." "I will write it for you, Kris. You are my friend, and friends help each other," Wyatt said. He got a piece of paper from his notebook. He took a pencil from his backpack. "Tell me what you want to say." "Thanks, Wyatt. This is what I want to tell Santa. Dear Santa, I love you very much. I love Christmas and giving gifts and singing songs. I want to be on your reindeer team so that I can help you give gifts all over the world. I want to be a reindeer. Love, Kris Moose." Wyatt wrote very carefully, and he put down just what Kris said. Kris put his hoofprint on the bottom of the letter by his name. Wyatt put the letter into an envelope addressed to Santa Claus at the North Pole. Then Kris followed Wyatt to the mailbox, and they watched the letter go down, down, down the chute. "The letter will go to Santa, and he will know that you want to be on his team," said Wyatt with a smile. "I know Santa reads his letters because I asked him for a sled last year, and he brought me one. Maybe he will read your letter and make you part of the team." "Oh, I hope so," said Kris. "I want to be part of Santa's team more than anything." That night, Kris was so excited he could hardly sleep. He wondered if the letter had started on its way yet. He wondered how long it would take to get to Santa. A few days later, Kris saw two strangers walking through town. One was a man with white hair and a long white beard. The other was a lady with her hair rolled up in a bun. They both wore long brown winter coats and thick black boots. As Kris watched, the two people looked around and pointed toward him. And they walked across the road until they were standing right next to him. "Are you Kris Moose?" asked the man in a happy voice. "Yes, sir, I am Kris Moose, but I shouldn't talk to strangers." The man laughed. "Ho, ho, ho! I'm not a stranger. You wrote me a letter." "Are you Santa Claus?" asked Kris. "Where is your sleigh? Where are your reindeer? Where is your red suit?" "Slow down, Kris," laughed the lady. "Santa only wears his red suit on Christmas Eve. The rest of the time, he wears regular working clothes. And the sleigh only comes out on Christmas Eve, too." "That's right," said Santa. "Right now all of the reindeer are resting for the big night." Kris felt sad. He wanted to see the reindeer and the sleigh. "We came to talk to you about your letter. Why do you want to be on the reindeer team?" asked Santa. "I want to help you make the boys and girls all over the world happy for Christmas. I want to be part of your team and fly around the world bringing presents," answered Kris. Santa and Mrs. Claus looked at each other for a moment. "Kris, God made you a moose for a very special reason. I can't turn you into a reindeer," Santa said as he shook his head. "But I want to be on your team," said Kris. "Kris, I'm afraid you can't be on the reindeer team," said Mrs. Claus. "The harness is too small to fit a moose, and Santa's flying magic only works on reindeer. But I have a special job for you if you want it." "A special job?" Kris asked. "Oh, yes, a very special job. There are some boys and girls who don't have a house, so Santa can't land his sleigh on the roof. We need a helper to bring presents to those children. Can you help us with them?" Kris thought for a moment. "Will I be part of Santa's team if I do?" he asked. "Oh, yes," said Santa. "You'll be a very big part of my team, just like the elves who make the toys and the ones who bring me the mail. On my team there are many helpers who do many things to help me make Christmas a success. You will help me get toys to all of the children." "Okay," said Kris. "I will be your helper. I will carry toys to the boys and girls who don't have a house. My hooves can go across the deepest snow. My legs can run very far. I will be a good helper." "Thank you, Kris," said Santa. "We are glad you will be a part of our team." "I have something special for you, Kris," said Mrs. Claus as she pulled something out of her pocket. "Your red and white scarf is very pretty, but you need some green, too. I made this scarf for you to remind you that you are part of Santa's team. Merry Christmas, Kris Moose." Kris smiled as Mrs. Claus wrapped the scarf around his neck. "Merry Christmas, Santa! Merry Christmas, Mrs. Claus!" said Kris. "Ho, ho, ho!" laughed Santa. Forever after, Kris was the happiest moose anywhere, because he was a helper on Santa's team. Thank you for joining us for the story of Kris Moose, written and narrated by Mary Beth McGee. For more children's stories, visit us at Barnabas on the Road. You'll find stories of Barnabas, the traveling zebra, as well as his friends like Kris Moose.